Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody. I'm in Midwestern DMZ today.
So you're in Chicago. What are you doing in a deep blue urban city like Chicago?
Well, I am here. As you know, Bill, the University of Chicago has a storied history of conservatism. You've got Leo Strauss and Milton Friedman and other notable, the Chicago School of Economics.
Are you trying to mask the fact that you are in an academic institution? You're a part of the academic elite?
Technically so, or that. No, I'm at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, and it's actually a cool-looking building with a lot of cool memorabilia. Of course, I'm not in one of those rooms, so it's a little bit sterile, and the lighting probably isn't terrific. But yeah, I'm here, and it's awesome. I'm doing a fellowship this semester. We had Matthew Continetti came out a couple weeks ago and talked about the intellectual roots of conservatism. Then I had Michael Weir, who did faith-based initiatives for Obama, who came out and we talked about faith and politics. Last night, David Petrugia, our friend, the author and historian, came out to talk about Reagan. And next week, our friend Kristen Soltis, sadly will not be here, but we're going to Skype her in to talk about millennials and Trump and the future. So
a great, not the DMZ, but she was, what was she DMZ or was she Week in Blog?
That's a good question. We have to go back to
check the
files.
Archives. But she is a illustrious alumni of this show in one of its forms.
She has filled in for me on, I think, probably more than one occasion. So, but it's been a while.
So busy as you are, I don't know if you were glued to the TV or tracking Twitter last night during the swath of primaries that occurred last night.
Well, for the sake of a good show, let's just pretend I haven't. And you can. Now, of course, I know everything you're about to say, but you could, for the sake of the show, maybe tell us what we need to know.
Well, I was writing something for Politico, which has not gone up yet, focusing on the Democrats. So I wasn't following the Republican side as much. I do know that Lou Barletta won the Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania, who Trump endorsed and gave a late robocall to, which I know some folks thought that was a lot of effort on Trump's part for a race that Barletta should have been able to win easily. I think he won it relatively easily, but people took note that he got help.
I heard that Raul Labrador lost a gubernatorial. Now, is he done from the Congress or?
Yes, he's not. He wasn't running for the House.
That is so interesting. So wasn't he kind of like a rising star?
He was, but I think he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I believe he lost to Lieutenant Governor Brad Little, who I think was running the most establishment-like campaign for. Yeah, so Brad Little was Lieutenant Governor. I think he had the most establishment support in the state. So not super shocking. I mean, this is a very conservative state, of course. Had Republican governors for a long time, and I don't believe the current incumbent was considered unpopular, so not crazy that the lieutenant governor would ascend. But the big Democratic story out of there is that the first Native American nominee, Native American woman, Paulette Jordan, won a race where people didn't give her good odds going in because the white man in the race was the nominee 4 years ago. He was 72. For what it's worth, he's Mormon in a state that has a strong Mormon population. Wealthy businessman, supported Romney in 2012. So some people have taken this as, and I can get more into the Democratic side in a little bit, as a case of the left beating, a moderate establishment. I think it's a little overblown in Hideo's case because their actual platforms weren't all that different, although he had the Romney mark on him to say you're not really down with progressivism, and it's certainly highly relevant that someone Native American has reached this level. Although not a lot of people give her strong odds to win in the general, considering how Republican the state is, but still a precedent set.
So, were those the big? Again, I'm asking this as like a hypothetical for those who don't know what happened. Were those kind of the So it was Pennsylvania and
well, on the Democratic side, the race that's getting the most attention is Nebraska 2, because this is the Omaha area where Obama picked off an electoral vote back in 2008, but
this used to be Lee Terry's district at some point,
yeah,
right?
I think that's right. So Romney won it in 2012. I think in that same year was when Terry lost to Brad Ashford, who was a Republican turned Democrat. And Ashford was a relatively moderate Democrat. Ashford loses in the 2014 Republican midterm, and now he was trying to reclaim the seat in what is presumably going to be a more favorable Democratic year. But he was going up against a diehard progressive in Kara Eastman, who was running on a single-payer platform, whereas Ashford is running on a more moderate. I mean, that was an actual blue dog in the House. And Eastman barely won by about 1,000 votes. I think it matters like a percentage point, I think. I mean, still, it's a pretty small district, small number of people voting. But that was straight up, Progressive Change Campaign Committee and Justice Democrats endorsing Eastman and the DCCC endorsing Ashford. So people are looking at that and saying, big loss for the D-Trip, progressive activism, win the driver's seat in these races. I think that is oversimplifying things. It's certainly relevant in Nebraska. I mean, that's a clear win. I'm not caveating that. There is the question that people who were skeptical of Eastman saying, well, she is not a good choice for that district. Ashford was the much more electable choice. Here's a case of progressives are going to win the battle and lose the war. Of course, progressives are saying that's what you conventional wisdom types think. We're going to prove to you now that a candidate like Eastman can win in a district like Nebraska too. So it's definitely a test case to look at to remember.
Now, last week you had a narrative which was that crazy loses, or that crazy isn't. The crazy. How did you?
Well, Eastman's not crazy.
No, but I'm not saying but how did you frame it last week? What was your?
Last was a bad night for crazy with Blankenship losing and Kucinich losing. There really wasn't anybody like that.
But is there any overart for those of us who are looking for what's the big story? Is this just a bunch of ad hoc, or is there an overarching? The
biggest overall story, I think, is the success of Democratic women. I think that is more broad-based than what happened in Nebraska, which is a woman winning. But not every woman winning was a progressive choice over an establishment favored choice.
So it's a woman. It's the night of the woman. It's
definitely a night of the woman. Women won most of the open races. Pennsylvania, as of this moment, has 0 women in its congressional delegation. They will get at least 3 based on these results alone, because you have women winning in Pennsylvania 4 and Pennsylvania 5, which are considered safe blue districts, and a woman in Pennsylvania 6, which is considered a probable blue.
Republican woman. She was the granddaughter of a coal miner, something Hart, maybe. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely, but she's not in Congress now.
No, but anyway, I thought she was one of those up and comers, but yeah, how quickly we forget.
Pennsylvania has had women in Congress, and they still don't have any currently.
This was sort of like a Kristi Noem type. I think like a young, up and coming female Republican Congresswoman, like an Elise Stefanik sort of type. And don't know what happened to her.
I'm not sure. So you have races in Pennsylvania, the one race that people were looking at most closely was Pennsylvania 7, because that was a race where the D-Trip was kind of poking around and arguably was leaning on people to get out. And one of them, Greg Edwards, made a big fuss over that, saying these people in Washington are trying to kick me out of the race and I'm not going anywhere. He got a lot of the progressive activist endorsements. He got the Bernie endorsement. But there was also a woman in the race, Susan Wild, who had the Emily's List endorsement, who arguably Dietrich was trying to nudge out too. And you had a third guy named Morganelli, who was one of the more conservative Democrats running in primaries. He said nice things about Trump. He was against sanctuary cities. I believe he leaned right on abortion. But Wild, the woman, wins in that race. And she was running on a pretty liberal platform, certainly more liberal than Morganelli. But she said, I support, just as an example, I support single payer as a goal, but we should focus on improving ACA right now. So you might say, that's a whole lot more left than where Democrats were 4 years ago. Here's evidence of the Bernie influence on the party. That's true. But she wasn't getting the big progressive endorsements because Greg Edwards was saying, I want single payer now. So I think that's still a dividing line between the populist and the pragmatist, where Wild was on the relative pragmatist side and she defeats a Bernie endorsed candidate. That is also the case in Pennsylvania 5, a very crowded primary where Bernie endorsed another male named Rick Laser. And a woman named Mary Gay Scanlon wins that race with a similar single-payer position as Wild in 7. Now you have another case in Pennsylvania 1 where FDR's vice president, Henry Wallace, his grandson, Scott Wallace, wins that race over a woman veteran named Rachel Reddick. And Wallace, of course, very left, pro single payer, still didn't get the Bernie endorsement or the progressive activist endorsement, maybe which could be because he's super wealthy and arguably as a carpetbagger. He was voting in Maryland. He has a big estate in South Africa, and he outspent Reddick 16-1. So some people are pointing to that and saying, hey, Reddick might have been the more electable choice here. She was the veteran. She was not as left. Congressman Seth Moulton had a tweet complaining our crisis in campaign finance is why problem solvers like Rachel Reddick can't win. But there are other military veterans that are raising plenty of money. Reddick did so poorly because she didn't own up to the fact that she was a registered Republican until last year. And when that was found out, she had this totally lame excuse saying, oh, I've always been a Democrat for the last 10 years. There's some clerical error or some mistake on my part that I didn't fix this problem over the last 10 years, which she moved several times. She played opportunities to fix this, and she did it. I think Democrats are more than happy to welcome converts, but you got to explain yourself. So once that happened, Wallace got all the local endorsement. He got the local party endorsement. His intro ad features the Bucks County commissioner. In fact, he says, I called her to say, do you want to run for Congress? And the commissioner says, I said, no, you, Scott Wallace, should run for Congress. And so he got kind of local fairy dust put on him. And he grew up there and he could talk about his family and whatnot. So the ideological wins, there's different ideological cross currents here across the races. And it was not enough to just be a woman because, again, Reddick lost in Pennsylvania 1. There's another Emily's List backed woman named, last name was Corbin Johnson, in Pennsylvania 10. She was the only woman in that race, yet she lost to a guy who raised less money than her. Because Corbin Johnson was also a bit of a carpetbagger. I mean, she grew up there, but she hadn't lived there in a bit. Also very young, 26 years old. She raised more than the winner, but almost all of her money was out of state. So it was evidence that she didn't have that local network. So it was not enough. So if you get into the surface, it's not enough to just be a woman. The women that won had good local ties, were good fundraisers, and didn't have to pick a particular ideological track. They did what they thought made sense for their district.
All right, so I got two quick questions for you before we move from the election stuff. One is, so there isn't a big story, a big narrative from last night other than the night of the woman, but throughout this primary cycle, the Democratic side, is there any theme that we should be aware of? And then what else is on the radar? Like when's the next, what are the next states, or what are some of the next primaries we should be paying attention to coming up?
Well, for last question first, so we had another round next week. I know it's Texas and Arkansas. I believe there are a couple, maybe Georgia's next week too. I'll double check while I'm talking to you. But I know, so there's the Texas runoff next week. So the big race on the Democratic side is Texas 7. That's where D-Trip was winning the heaviest and directly attacked the more liberal candidate, Laura Moser. And she used that to her advantage to say the Washington people are trying to boss us around. Let's show them what's what. So she made the runoff against another woman, and Emily's list back candidate, who's seen as more pragmatic. So that's a showdown to watch next week. And there's another race. The names are escaping me, but there's another race in Arkansas that is a D-Trip person versus.
Is this going to be like every week we have primaries, or is like May a hot month and then it goes dormant for a while? Or, do you know how that shakes out?
So I'm looking at the calendar right now. So May is Arkansas, Texas, Georgia, and Kentucky. So Georgia, you have a big gubernatorial primary there. You might get Democrats nominating an African American woman, Stacey Abrams, in that race. Georgia's been shifting blue. There's a healthy African American population there, so people are wondering if Abrams can be the one who puts it over the top, but she has to win the primary. And Kentucky, one of the big Democratic primaries there, you might have seen the viral video from Amy McGrath, who was the fighter pilot, who talked about how Mitch McConnell and others wouldn't change the law so she could join the military, and she got in there anyway over the resistance. That video was a huge success, and she's got a lot of money from that video, so she has a very professional ad campaign there, but she has never run for office before. She's going up against Jim Gray, who is the mayor of Lexington, and when he ran for Senate against Rand Paul, he won that district. So he has vote-getting experience that McGrath doesn't have, and I think I don't think he has a D-Trip endorsement directly, but I think a lot of insiders think he would be the more electable choice over McGrath just because he has the experience there. Also openly gay, which I don't think has really been much of an issue in the race, but it would be notable if Kentucky sent a gay congressman, a gay man to Congress. So there's a lot of stuff happening next week, and then June 5th is a big day. California primaries, governor, Senate, several House races, and they have the bizarre top two system, and Democrats are panicking that there are districts that they are really primed to win so long as they get one person in the top two. There's so many Democratic candidates they could carve up the vote, and two Republicans get in the top two slots. So that's going to be something people watch. There's also a crazy San Francisco mayoral race going on because Ed Kim passed away. London Breed, president of the Board of Supervisors, was interim mayor until the other supervisors voted her out of office to hamstring her for this special election. She's an African-American woman, would be the first African-American woman mayor of San Francisco to be elected, although she wasn't for a few weeks. But she's seen as relatively conservative on the San Francisco spectrum, so the progressives have not only ousted her from the interim spot, two of the candidates, Jane Kim and Mark Leno, have an alliance. It's ranked choice voting in San Francisco. You vote for your top three choices if you want. Kim and Leno are saying, we're voting for each other, with the implication, we don't want you to vote for London Breed. Let's box her out. So that's something to watch.
It seems like you know a lot about these races.
But Joe, I can't go too into these other ones, but also June 5th, it's Mississippi, Alabama, Iowa, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota. So that's a really big day.
How do you know? How and why do you know all this?
Well, I'm looking at it on the New York Times website right now.
Okay, but I feel like you've done a little homework on this too.
Well, this is my job. This is what I got to do.
Technically, my job too, Bill. So, any big at this point in the primary cycle, is there a big theme, or is it just sort of hodgepodge? And maybe that's Hayekian. Maybe that's good, right? It's what works here may not work there, and sort of like see how it all shakes out.
Well, I think hodgepodge is the emerging theme. You're seeing a bunch of headlines today saying the left is winning the Civil War. And I think that's overstating it on the based on the Eastman race. I think the real story here is there are different types of candidates winning in different races. You're going to have lots of test cases for people to argue over come November. Who had the right prototype to win? Was it the progressive populist like Eastman, or was it left of center but more pragmatic like a Susan Wild in Pennsylvania 7? And it could be that it's such a blue wave that they all win, and everyone will get to make their case, and then they will get resolved, and we relitigate all over again for the 2020 primary, or there'll be a certain group that wins and a certain group that doesn't win, and then we'll argue about it. So I don't think anything is going to be settled by these primaries based on what we've seen so far, but we do have a lot of primaries to go.
Yeah, and I don't know if there should be. I mean, I don't know if there needs to be like a narrative or a common theme. And maybe, in fact, it may be smarter not to have one, actually. Someone has written, and we've been talking about this for a long time, but someone, I forget who, someone recently made this point I saw somewhere that let a million flowers bloom or whatever.
One of the races I do want to mention from last night, which I do think is important, Pennsylvania lieutenant governor. So Democrats already have the governorship, lieutenant governor in Pennsylvania, but the lieutenant governor was scandal tainted for allegedly abusing staff, although he was denying it. He stayed on the ballot, but he had a lot of challengers. He got beat handily by John Fetterman, who you might remember from 2016 as the 6'8", goateed, tattooed mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, hard scrabble, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania town. He was running as a Bernie-crat in the 2016 Senate primary and had a record of achievement in a difficult city of Braddock to say, look, I came here to help turn things around, and I am turning things around. But even though he backed Bernie didn't back him in 2016, and he did better than expected in the primary, but came up short. This time around, Bernie did endorse him, and he won the primary very handily. And again, Bernie's picks did not win other Pennsylvania House races, so it's not that Bernie's magic, but he did help Fetterman, and I think Fetterman helped himself.
Who's the most? I mean, I know the answer is it depends. It depends who you are and where you are, but who's the best endorsement out there right now? Is it Bernie? Is it Biden? Does Obama play at all in this? Is it the D-Trip? Who is the endorsement you want?
Biden is the one endorsement that you can get in any district, and the candidate will accept it. Now, there may be places where you'd rather have a Bernie or a Warren than a Biden because it's the constituency there is more to the left. But there's no one's going to say, Biden, stay out of my district. I don't want you here.
Cool. All right. Well, as you know, I'm on a bit of I'm actually technically having my office hours, which means that I don't think everything's scheduled, but kids could come by anytime and I mean, soak up my mentorship. Let's be honest. What an amazing opportunity that they have. But what else?
No one's asking for your wisdom at this precise moment, though, correct?
Just you and the dozens of people who watch this show. Let me do a quick. We normally do this at the end, but I want to do a quick mention of a shameless promotion here is Patreon. Bill, you have launched a Patreon page.
Following in your footsteps.
and I want to encourage people to support it because, man, I wish we'd tapped into this a couple years ago. On one hand, I feel late to the game. I see people like, I don't know if Ben Shapiro's there, but there are certainly like Dave Rubin who have thousands of patrons who are supporting their work. And so in a way, I feel like we're too late to the game. But on the other hand, I actually did a thing because I wanted to support other people. I wanted to myself donate. And so I let the Patreon app go through my Facebook friends and my Twitter friends, and virtually nobody I know is on Patreon doing this. So in a way, we're behind the curve. In a way, I think we may be still early adopters.
Right.
How do people? This is to support your podcast. How do people do it?
Well, you go to patreon.com/Bill Scher, and you may be saying, you've been doing DMZ for free for 10 years.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't need the money. Number one, you're wrong. Number two, this is specifically to support my new podcast, New Books in Politics, on the New Books Network. Something else where I don't get paid. I can only do so many things for free, people. You gotta pay me for something if I'm going to be able to keep doing it. And I've been able to introduce some great people. I got Amanda Carpenter from CNN for my latest episode. That's up right now, talking about her book, Gaslighting America. And I got a special deal. If you donate $10 per month, you are christened a bookworm, and bookworms get advance notice of guests and the opportunities to submit questions to those guests. I like
that. That's a good idea with asking the questions. So mine's patreon.com/Matt Lewis, and you do not get to ask questions if you give there. But I will send you an autographed copy of my book. If you go to that level, that Bill Scher bookworm level, then for $10 you're gonna get the book. So I think it's a super cool idea. Bill, I have to say though how demoralizing it was last night when I went to bed and I was at 99 patrons. I'm not making this up. One more and I would have been at triple digits. I wake up this morning, 98.
Oh.
I haven't tracked down who bailed on me. But it would have been better for that person to have never been born, is what I will say. But I can't tell you, I was so close to triple digits, and then to go backward.
Well, I want to get started talking about one of your recent pieces, which relates to the move.
It might have been this piece that cost me the patron.
That could be.
Totally possible.
That could be. So you wrote about the move of the American Embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which you support.
Yeah.
And here's something, I don't know if we're going to get into it, but where you and I strenuously disagree on the merits of this. But even though you support the decision, you did not like who Trump chose to speak at the ceremony.
That is right. It's this guy, Robert Jeffress. I don't even know how it's pronounced. I think it's Jeffress. I know how it's spelled. We'll call him Jeffress. He's pastor of a large Southern Baptist church in Dallas, and he has said a lot of controversial things. And once it was announced that he was going to be giving this prayer at the relocation of the embassy, there was a lot of Twitter pushback. But interestingly, now I opposed him for a variety of reasons, including the fact that he's a total Trump suck-up, and he did this thing which is really ridiculous, where his choir sang a couple years ago during the campaign. His choir did this pro-Trump song, which strikes me as like part idolatry, part sycophancy, part just bad music. All three are unpardonable in my book. So I'm not a big fan of his, but the interesting thing to me was that the pushback that he was getting on Twitter, like people were saying, Robert Jeffress said that Jews who haven't accepted Jesus won't go to heaven, or that Mormons are a cult, And there were a few things that people were throwing back at him. And I wrote a piece saying, like, look, I don't think it's great to go around telling people that they're going to go to hell. I mean, look, I get the idea. Like, if you believe that the only way to have eternal salvation is to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then you could argue that the compassionate thing to do is to go around telling other people that they're going to go to. I mean, there's an argument for it. It's not my style. I actually think it does more harm than good. I don't think it's a great way to win people over to Christ. And again, I'll do the disclaimer, which is to say I am a believer, but I don't pretend to be a great Christian. I think I'm a sinner saved by grace, and I do a lot of bad stuff, and I use bad language. And if you go out there digging through the DMZ archives, you will find plenty of examples that would probably make me look like a hypocrite for things that I have said on this show that were not terribly Christian. But having said all of that, it struck me that most of the things that Jeffress is being accused of on Twitter were actually things that almost every Orthodox, and this is an important distinction, Bill, because not everyone got this, lowercase o for Orthodox. I'm not talking about Orthodox, the Orthodox Church. I'm like Orthodox meaning strict adherent to the generally accepted what it means to be a Christian. So lowercase o. Most of the things that Jeffress was accused of saying, whether or not he should have been saying them, most Orthodox Christians, certainly Protestants, certainly Baptists, would say the exact same thing if if they had the guts to admit to it. I mean, the idea is that there is a Bible verse where Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. Like, by definition, Christianity is an exclusive religion. Anybody could become a Christian, but unlike, say, like the pagan religions in the Roman Empire that preceded it, where they could have many gods, and you could be a Christian and a follower of Zeus or whatever. Christianity is like, it's an exclusive relationship. You're not going to date other people if you're dating me. That's basically what it is. It's a selfish God, and it's a so monotheist. It's this. So I guess the point is that the things that were tweeted out about Jeffress, the ones that I saw, I'm sure he said some other horrible things that I don't agree with, or that Orthodox Christians wouldn't agree with. But the things that I saw that to the untrained ear would sound very like intolerant and very bad, I wanted to make the point that A, I don't think he's a great guy. B, I don't think he was the right person to be delivering this speech. But C, interestingly, most of the things being said about him on Twitter were actually reflections that are consensus positions, mainstream consensus positions, certainly of Protestant Christians.
Well, so if that's the case, why are you so bothered that he spoke?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is he has baptized Donald Trump's sins. I think that he is somebody who has taken Donald Trump's the Stormy Daniels thing is just a prime example. He's not bothered by that, right? So I think he is putting politics. For a guy who goes around saying, like, I'm no compromise, I'm just what the Bible says, well, he's more than willing to compromise for Donald Trump. That's number one. Number two, even though a Christian may believe that the only way to get into heaven is by accepting Jesus as your personal Savior, and by the way, a lot of other religions make exclusive claims too, and a lot of other religions, I mean, some people call Christians infidels. So, I mean, Christianity isn't alone in sort of feeling like they have cornered the market on the way to get to heaven. But I personally feel like the rhetoric and the it's not just the rhetoric, but it is the way that people like Jeffress talk actually does more harm than good for the cause. So I am of the belief personally that that you can win more souls to heaven by virtue of living a lifestyle that reflects and Christianity is a pretty. I don't pretend to be an expert. I'm not a theologian, man. I've never been to seminary, but Christianity does have the exclusive parts, yes. But there's also like the Sermon on the Mount, and there's a lot of and there's the stuff about poverty and charity, and so in other words, I believe that like living a lifestyle that demonstrates a sort of a joy and a peace is much more persuasive than going around telling people that they're going to hell. Then lastly, I would say that this is a diplomatic thing. This is a political moment. It was a symbolic moment. It was a diplomatic moment. And not only is Jeffress offensive to a lot of Americans, but I would assume a lot of Jews in Israel may not be the best messenger to send over there.
Well,
so Bill, I can tell you're about to fall asleep.
No. I'm
pulled an all-nighter, didn't you?
I only got 2.5 hours of sleep, so that's true. But I do think this is a very interesting subject, an important subject. I interviewed for my other podcast, New Books in Politics. I interviewed Stephen Strang, who wrote God and Donald Trump, and Strang runs Charisma Media, which is a website for charismatic Christians, and
which is like Pentecostal, full gospel.
Yes.
It's not exactly the same, but essentially Pentecostal.
Yes, and he talked about, number one, that people in his circles are the Christians or the evangelicals that strongly embrace Trump because they saw that God was using Trump as a vessel for his wishes. They believe that God chose him and that God had a hand in the election.
King Cyrus sort of argument.
Right. And they believe that some of the quotes in the book from Huckabee and from Ben Carson were that talking to more skeptical Christians, Trump is someone who listens to good counsel, who listens to wisdom. And you might say, that's crazy talk. His whole reason of being is ignoring the counsel of even some of his closest advisors. But from an evangelical perspective, he listens to them. He does what they ask him to do. And he does pick their judges. And now he is delivering on something that they very much want. There is this strain of apocalyptic Christianity, which believes you have to unite greater Israel for the rapture to come, and then those who accept Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior will be saved and ascend to heaven. And even though they believe deep down that if you're Jewish, you don't get to go, they think there's a chance to convert them just in time, so that they all get to go together. And so,
by the way, let me say, like growing up in all sorts of different churches, I went to a Brethren church, which is basically pacifists. I went to a Pentecostal church. I went to Baptist church. I've been around a lot of the Protestant denominations. And I had never heard this apocalyptic stuff. But on the other hand, we were always taught like the Jewish people are God's chosen people. And
this kind of comes out of the whole Left Behind series.
Yeah, I was very consistent. Yeah, well, I've never seen that movie, but it would have been some of the churches I grew up in would have been consistent with that. But I never heard the apocalyptic stuff, which obviously could have some weird political consequences in terms of what your geopolitical worldview. I had never even heard of that until I got involved in politics.
So from the left perspective, and there are people on the left who've been talking about this strand of Christianity and their influence in the Republican Party going back to the George Bush days. And this came with John Hagee and his brief flirtation with John McCain until McCain disowned him. So to see figures from that movement present on the day Trump moves the embassy, is horrifying to the left. For a Trump skeptic Christian conservative like yourself, what does it say to you that this alliance that Trump has created is so strong that he has taken it to it goes beyond mouthing the words, I'm going to bring all your jobs back, even though it doesn't really happen. He actually goes forth and does this.
Yeah. Well, first I would say, I mean, I probably don't need to make this point of clarification to you or to this audience, but like I've never really think of myself as a Christian conservative. Like that, to me, that calling somebody a Christian conservative has like a specific meaning that transcends the two words, right? It's Jerry Falwell.
Though you are Christian, you are a devout Christian, and you are conservative. I
try to be a devout Christian. I'm a Christian. I don't know if I'm always so devout.
Well, you want to be, which is more than many of us.
So it's sort of like I would never want to be a Christian comedian or a Christian rock band, but I could be in a rock band and be have faith or be a believer, right? So I mean, to me, I make that distinction because being like a Christian comedian or a Christian rock band really is lame. And by and large, they're not good. Like they wouldn't have made it without it. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like a crutch. And I don't even know if I am anymore. I mean, yeah, like I would never correct anybody for calling me a conservative, but more and more I think that I'm conservative, not a conservative. Mm-hmm. I don't want to play a semantic game because I know you don't want to. Your goal is not to like put me in a box.
No. But you care about conservatism and you care about Christianity.
Yeah, and religious liberty in general.
Right.
So to answer your question, very clearly these people have made a calculated decision that it's a transactional relationship, and it's not irrational. I think they probably actually are getting something out of the deal. But I think that it's clearly a reversal of everything that I was told when I was growing up, and certainly when Bill Clinton was president, about the importance of character, about the fact that you can't put things in certain domains, that you have to be domain general, which means that if I can't trust you, was it recently there was a politician that said like if I can't trust you with this, with your friend's wife, I can't trust you, or is it something like that, right? I mean, so like the thing is, Bill Clinton and his supporters were saying like, look, it's just sex. Everybody lies about sex, and like, but he could still be a good president, right? I mean, it doesn't mean, and we were all saying, and certainly the people who are now supporting Trump were the loudest, saying no. This is about character, and the president of the United States has to be, look, I don't have to be perfect because I'm not president, but if you're the president, you should be better than us. We need to uphold standards and values. And they have abandoned that. And I don't doubt that they do have an audience with the president, and maybe they can make a calculation, a pragmatic calculation that it's going to be better for them with Trump than it is with Hillary. But that is a city of man political calculation, right? And so once you go down that road, then you are entering into the world of politics, and that's fine. But I think there's a not only a hypocrisy, but like a loss of, once you've made that acceptance, you've crossed the Rubicon.
But in this transactional relationship, it has produced a result which you like. You like that Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, yes?
Yeah, look, Trump's done some things that I like. I've always said that when Trump does something I like, I will give him credit for it, and I will say it. And I think that there are Donald Trump's tax cuts. I'm not saying that they're a panacea, but on the margins, I support them. I think they were good.
I want to stay in Jerusalem for a bit.
Let me make this point real quick.
Okay.
Whether that's or Gorsuch or Jerusalem, he's done some things that I like. Now, I couldn't vote for a guy that I fear and still fear is he's a complete liar. You can't trust him at all. He's totally mendacious. He is tearing apart the social fabric of this country, and so that's a huge asterisk. I mean, I'm with him on the embassy.
So the line from Bolton that I heard, and I'm sure others have made it too, which is, aren't you worried this is going to be bad for the peace process? And the line is, I think accepting reality is always good for peace. And in my mind, that's just like such transparent bullshit. If you are for moving to the embassy, you're basically saying, I do not care what the Palestinians want. We're going to assert what we want, and that's the end of the story. Either you can accept what we're taking, or we're just going to steamroll you. It betrays or exposes a complete disinterest in any kind of negotiated peace agreement. Which, look, if you want to say, I don't care about a peace agreement with the Palestinians, I don't care about a two-state solution, I think Israel should just take what they want to take, and that's my position. If that's an honest position, I may strongly disagree with it, but at least get where you're coming from. But this notion of like, oh, this is going to be really good for the peace process strikes me as total nonsense. But is that where you are in all this? Or do you feel like, yeah, I don't think a peace agreement with the Palestinians is a possible thing. They're not trustworthy negotiating partners. Therefore, Israel should do what is good for Israel.
Well, I mean, I'm skeptical that we can negotiate with them or that Israel can negotiate with them, that they're going to be honest brokers, but I'm hopeful. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And I think even Netanyahu wants a two-state solution. I mean, I think most, no, that may be very much defined on his terms or on Israel's terms, but like, so I wouldn't, I don't buy the spin that this is going to be good for the peace process, but I also don't think it's going to be bad. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that
even after what happened in the immediate aftermath, that doesn't make you pause.
No, it doesn't make me I mean, I'm saddened by it, but by the loss of life, but it doesn't change my mind about it, about the decision to do it. This move to me reminds, and by the way, this is the capital of Israel. This is the capital. Like, that is a fact. We are moving our embassy to the capital of their country that they have decided is the capital. And they are obviously our strongest ally in the Middle East. So to me, this there's a lot about Trump that really bothers me. To me, this is in the Reagan mold of doing things that upset some diplomats and people who are sort of hand-wringing and maybe a little bit overly cautious. I wonder if anybody else would have done this. I mean, Rubio, I think, said he would do this. Cruz said he would do this. I wonder if they would have actually followed through. And maybe that Donald Trump is the only guy who would have actually followed through. And that's the part about Trump that I think is actually admirable and does remind me of Reagan, whether it's to tear down this wall or evil empire, doing things that the so-called experts said violates norms, that but actually doing them. And it is breaking of norms. And I think a lot of norms, it's very dangerous to break them. And I have very grave concerns about them. And this is one of the norms that I think is actually healthy to break. I think, so I'm pretty excited or optimistic about this kind of move.
So you and I had a back and forth about this over Twitter. So if you haven't seen it, I agree that there are times when assumptions by experts can be misplaced. And when someone kind of shows up and tramples all over them, there are times when things don't turn out as badly as you think they're going to turn out. So when Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union an evil empire, people had their hair stand up saying, where are you taking us here? But it wasn't evident at the time, but Reagan did have an inner compass, which was, I really don't like nuclear weapons. I really want to get rid of them. And if the Soviet Union does recalibrate where it sits, I would be willing to talk to them about it. So when Gorbachev got in there, Reagan recognized, this is someone I can do business with. And even when he stormed out of Reykjavik, which also pissed off liberals, he had a deal on the table to have this massive kind of nuclear weapons that he walked away from over Star Wars. He still revealed to Gorbachev in that meeting that he would be open to getting rid of all nuclear weapons. And so that their conversations kept going after that. When Gorbachev came to the conclusion, you know what, Star Wars, who cares? Let's do a cut of mid-range nuclear weapons. Reagan agreed to it, and defended that decision when people on the far right were skeptical. So there was something inside Reagan which you couldn't see clearly, I think, in the first term, but was what was inside. So that was more three-dimensional than what we recognized. And even with Trump, I am not even with what's happening in North Korea today, where North Korea is starting to pull back, I mean, I think it's totally possible that John Bolton is deliberately sabotaging the North Korea talks by saying, "Oh, they should follow the Libya model." North Korea's like, "Whoa, that does not sound cool at all."
That's what Jonah Goldberg has been saying. That, like, that Bolton is intentionally trying to freak them out and sabotage it.
And I think it's totally possible. It's also possible that Trump says, "Shut up, Bolton. You're here just to say stuff on TV. I'm the one calling the shots here."
No, I just this morning I saw that Sarah Huckabee was pushing back on Bolton's comments about that and saying that there's nothing to do with Libya, says nothing to do with Libya, and I've heard no
I think
comparison.
It's totally possible that Trump wants a deal because he likes putting his name on deals, and the Iran deal sucks because his name's not on it. I want to get rid of that deal because it's Obama's deal, and I'm going to do my Trump deal, and the Trump deal could be worse than Obama's deal. It could be North Korea gives up nothing of consequence. It could be totally intellectually inconsistent, but it would show that there is a part of Trump somewhere in all that awfulness that wants to have his name on a peace deal. So I don't discount that possibility. I do think moving the embassy to Jerusalem is more than a symbolic trolling of a norm. It's a much more concrete act than a rhetorical slam of the Soviet Union. I mean, this is something that, this is one of the key disputed elements of all the peace talks that have happened over the last several decades, and we're just saying Israel wins. I think that seems like a much bigger deal than anything Reagan did, and I think it comes from a place of Trump that shows a complete disinterest in finding a solution there.
Reagan met with Solzhenitsyn. How do I pronounce that?
I'll never pronounce it correctly.
Reagan supplied the Contras, and I mean he did things too that were very bold, and so it's not just the rhetoric, but look, we may just have to. I'm afraid that I'm going to get yelled at for any minute, but we may just have to agree to disagree on this one. But I think that I think this is much ado about nothing. That this is an example of him keeping a promise and doing something that this is an ally, this is their country, this is their capital. Of course, we should have our embassy there, and it's not a heavy lift in terms of Trump getting it done. He doesn't need Congress to vote for doing this. In fact, I think Congress already voted to do this. And correct me if I'm wrong. So this is a deliverable, and I think it sends a message both abroad and domestically that's pretty positive, and I think it's good politics as well. I think it checks off a lot of boxes.
I'll give you the last word. What else do you want to plug before we sign off?
So support our Patreons, man.
Yeah.
Just go to patreon.com/BillScher and patreon.com/Matt Lewis, and follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show.
All right.
All right.
Till next week, sir. More primaries. More primaries next week.
And keep us posted.
Take care.
Thanks, Bill.